Welcome to Beyond the Brink. This is a program about things that are happening worldwide that are bringing people to the brink. My name is Christy.
And I'm Melissa.
Good to have you here today. Today's show should be an interesting show, and it's a topic that Melissa and I have talked quite a bit about, and it's back in the news again, and that is those globalist overlords that are meeting in Davos. Whitney Webb she's an investigative reporter, and she just did an interview about this, and we're going to go ahead and break that down. But first, here's a word from one of our affiliate partners.
Beyond the Brink is partnered with Swan Bitcoin. We chose Swan Bitcoin because it's easy and inexpensive and the best form of financial protection if you're hit with a disaster. It's perfect for both new and experienced Bitcoiners. Set up a Bitcoin savings plan and never miss out on the dips. Get a free book, Inventing Bitcoin, the technology behind the first truly scarce and decentralized money, and $10 of Bitcoin when you use our affiliate link, vitabroadcastnetwork.com/beyond. That's vitabroadcastnetwork.com/beyond.
Gotta love those Swan people. They're terrific.
They are.
Just a side note about Bitcoin. If you're just getting into Bitcoin, thinking about getting into Bitcoin, and you don't know where else to start, one of the safest places to go is Swan Bitcoin. They have an A to Z how-to manual on how to do it, bunch of educational videos, free material, and you get $10 of free Bitcoin if you use our affiliate link. Yeah. So the other feature is the set it and forget it feature.
I love it.
I like to buy Bitcoin every day, and I have a certain amount that they buy for me on a day-to-day basis, so that I'm never missing the dips.
It's the best way to dollar cost average in. You just set it, forget it, and then you can move it into your own wallet. It's incredibly easy. I feel safe using them. And it was one of my first experiences with purchasing Bitcoin, actually. So love Swan Bitcoin.
Yeah. And not that the show is about Bitcoin, but just on that note, so I've used several. I've used brokers and exchanges, and Swan by far is my favorite. Yeah. So having said that, our little digression there, why don't we get to the story of the day? And this is just a story at a glance of what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to do a deep dive. And then after this particular show, look for the follow-up show where we're going to go deep on who the players are behind all of this. So investigative journalist Whitney Webb, she revealed the inner workings of the World Economic Forum, the driving force behind the Great Reset. Yes, folks, the Great Reset, we're heading towards it. And the more information that we have about that, the better that we can push back, hopefully stop this thing. Beneath the World Economic Forum's surface, it becomes clear that corporatism and fascism is the modus operandi. This is really what they're doing, especially when we talk about public-private partnerships. The World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees is packed with powerful people, prominent representatives from both government and multinational corporations like BlackRock, Salesforce, Nestle's, Vanguard.
All the big players.
It's huge. It's just huge. The World Economic Forum supports the merging of man and machine, or transhumanism, and its fourth industrial revolution aims to use wearable and implantable technology to surveil your thoughts and launch a digital dictatorship. Can you imagine maybe getting zapped because you bought some cashews or you ate cashews and you're not supposed to?
That? Yeah.
And once implemented, a digital dictatorship will be almost impossible to escape. And this is something that we really need to push back on. This is some serious stuff.
We do need to push back on it. And one thing I'll say is they've been quietly implementing these things while we've been kind of sleeping we don't realize it. We're already kind of under the digital control with
Yeah.
the devices, and we think this new stuff is what's going to get us. But man, it's bad what they're planning. And you're right that the best way is for us to understand it and to fight back against it, which might mean not using some of those little fun things that we all love and love to use. So.
And you're right. The World Economic Forum has been working for decades, and we've just become uberly aware of it. And it may be too late, it may not be, but at least we are going to do our best to make sure that we can stop this charade that is affecting humanity as we know it. So just so you know that this World Economic Forum thing meets every January in Davos. And their theme this last year was cooperation in a fragmented world. And they noted that the world today is a critical inflection point. The sheer number of ongoing crises called for bold collective action. I think the biggest question is who's creating the crises? Now, their actions seem to be, altruistic and steeped in the warm, fuzzy buzzwords like green and sustainable. It will ultimately propel its little small circle of leaders, globalists, who will guarantee us into a populace that is going to be controlled. A populace unlike anything we've ever seen, the downtrodden, maybe zombie-like.
Oh, geez.
And if you dip your finger beneath the World Economic Forum's surface, it becomes clear that corporatism and fascism is what's behind this. Like I just said earlier, it's huge, and we have to stop that. This public-private partnership thing is not okay. But talk about their fascist ideology, that would be terrific.
Yeah. So part of this paper that was written by was it Dr. Marcola? And with Whitney Webb's material, she grabbed a quote from the WEF, the World Economic Forum. They often speak of transformative potential of the public-private partnerships. There we go.
The PPPs.
PPP. So in the quote, the private sector needs to speak the language of social change, and the public sector needs to create economic incentives to harness the private sector's innovation and expertise to address society's challenges. With shared goals, targeted action, and monitored impact, we can move beyond dialogue and aspiration to the co-creation of a more inclusive, prosperous, and sustainable future. End quote. That sounds great, right? I mean, when it like you say, it has the buzzwords, it has the good, happy feel words, but basically they're using the private sector, who again, they're a small bunch. You think the private sector, you'd think, oh, that means all of us and all of these ingenuity businesses that are up and coming, but it's actually a small few that are creating these things, and then you have the private putting the money into those things, and so you have a small group of people running the show, and that's very scary, in my opinion, to have so few people having so much control over every facet of our lives. So, and so it says, it sounds good in theory, but exactly what is the public-private partnership? And that's when private entities like multinational corporations, they join with the public sector, and they put the two on equal ground. But the problem is that most politicians receive money and other favors from these multinational corporations, and so many facets of the government are essentially owned then by the corporations. So it's really more of a private partnership. And what you have there is essentially a means of implementing specific policies that are being controlled more often than not by the corporate sector and promoting what is essentially a fusion of the private and public sector. So, I mean, Webb compared this ideology to Benito Mussolini, which is the founder of Italy's National Fascist Party. So I think, I don't know. I don't know if we can go into it a little bit further, but yeah, if you really pay attention and you look around to who has the control, look at our politicians, look at the things that are being pushed, problem, reaction, solution over and over and over again. So that's what, and this is their setup in order to do that. And we're the plebs that follow along.
Well, I can give you a real live example, and I know you see this in your community. It's in any town, community in this country and around the world. I live in a rural country, or I'm in a small city, a rural city next to a larger city. Okay, you might call it a suburb, and in this valley area around three mountains. Okay, so we've got a couple 100,000 people living in our county, but my town only has about 10,000 people. So we take a lot of grant funds. So when I start hearing about grant funds, I question, where's that money coming from? Yes. So when you look at behind it, you see that there are the same players. You have a charitable foundation. You have a construction company that started off as nothing and became a very big development company. And then you have them partnering with the government. But what happens is you start seeing the same building design from town to town, and you do a little bit of research and you find, like on the West Coast, a lot of these designs are coming out of Portland, Oregon, which is like the bastion of leftness. Okay, it's just really crazy where they don't want the police department, and then we had where they had created their own autonomy zone and all sorts of things that were all over the news. But when you look at these buildings, we're getting one in our little town where they're going to be putting in 50 live work units. Now, we have a hard time just bringing in businesses with already existing vacant property. These are properties that have been around a long time. And if we had involved the private sector, those properties can be renovated and be modernized. But no, what they're going to do is bring in this public-private partnership to where the public is providing some of the infrastructure, but the private is where all the profits go. The profits from the retail sales, the profits from the leases and the tenancy. The city doesn't get any of that. So if you want to do a Freedom of Information Act request to see where the money's going, you only get to see the public side. So you might see revenues coming in from water and electricity and that type of thing, but you're not going to see what's happening on the private. This is the dirty little secret. And they use grant funds, which are our taxpayer dollars that have just been redistributed all around the country and given to the various representatives and senators who represent certain areas. And you might hear it as pork packages. So that's what it looks like. And it's disgusting. And it's going on in any town, USA.
I can relate because just a small little example. When my kids were going to school, they were building a new school And the existing school that was also new that they were in, it had terrible heating and cooling problems. Like it didn't work in a brand new building.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, they built a new school, and guess what? They used the same heating and cooling company that they used in the other school. Well, two other schools. No, both of those didn't work. And then this one then also. And then the person that was in charge of, doing this project, they left after everything was done and said, right? They resigned or whatever, retired, and you're left with 3 schools with shoddy heating and cooling.
Right.
And why, if somebody was using our money properly, they would never have let that go. They would have said,
Right.
no, we're not going to hire the same contractor. So yeah, I mean, it happens at large levels and small levels.
Yeah. And it's top down, bottom up, inside out. I mean, it's like what had been drumbeat into our head over the last 12, 14 years now when we first heard that term. And it is a term from the past. It is, it's about redistribution. It's communism, fascism. I mean, and you have both ends of the spectrum, and they happen to be working together. And eventually, somebody's going to want to be in charge, going to be the fascist or the communist. But right now, they're working together to make this thing happen. And you do see this at the lower level, like what you just described. It's the same players, the same contractors. They're all in cahoots with each other, but they get this model from the World Economic Forum, and it passes down. And hopefully we'll have some time to talk about the world's organizational chart, if you will. So let's take a closer look at the World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees, and we'll go into a deep dive on this on the follow-up show that we'll do with this. So you may have heard of Klaus Schwab. He's the co-founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum, but it's also important to know who the Board of Trustees are. And so you have the head of the International Monetary Fund, that's Kristalina Georgieva. You've got Al Gore. That's all I got to say. Larry Fink.
He invented the internet.
Yeah. Larry Fink, he's the BlackRock CEO. Mark Benioff, he's the co-founder and CEO of Salesforce. You've got Mark Schneider, who is the CEO of Nestle, and one of the co-founders of the Carlyle Group, which is, he's also one of the co-founders of the Carlyle Group, and they have extensive intelligence connections. They have often said what's going on here is a psychological operation. The
Carlyle Group. Yeah, the Carlyle Group is a whole nother deep dive.
So these folks are essentially what's driving this public partnership model around the world, and they have very specific agendas. The World Economic Forum drafts policy papers and white papers, and then they are implemented by governments around the world. So if we can get into the public-private partnership pyramid, or you might call organizational chart, you'll understand what that just meant. So this includes a strategic alliance with the World Economic Forum that entered into the United Nations in 2019, and it called for the UN to use public-private partnerships as the model for nearly all policies that it implements, and most specifically, the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, sometimes referred to, here it comes, Agenda 2030.
Agenda 2030.
So Agenda 2030 is composed of 17 Sustainable Development Goals with 169 specific targets to be imposed across the globe. While sustainable development sounds like a perfectly reasonable goal and sounds noble, it hides the hideous truth, as these plans are not what they claim to be. So, who's Klaus Schwab?
Who is Klaus Schwab? Let's see here. So he was the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum in 1971. He created it. And in 1998, he was the co-founder together with his wife, Hildy Schwab, Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship. And then 2004, the founder of the Forum for the Young Global Leaders. And then 2011, he's the founder of the Global Shapers community.
Yeah, the Global Leaders is an interesting bunch.
Exactly. And there's a lot of leaders, there's a lot of politicians that came up through that program. But yeah, he definitely is a major player in all of this. I mean, you don't want to think that he's obviously not the only one. He's not alone in creating this.
Oh, no.
But he's definitely one of the biggest players involved.
Well, wasn't Klaus Schwab a student of Henry Kissinger when he was attending Harvard University in the 60s? And that's how he became acquainted with Harry Kissinger. And
yes.
Harry Kissinger has got his fingers in all things going on in the world, even to this day in his very, very old age. And it's interesting because Kissinger recruited Schwab at a Harvard International Seminar that was funded by the U.S. CIA. So there's definitely, what do you call intelligence connections here.
Mm-hmm.
And evidently, he had some connections through family. They created concepts on nuclear deterrence that eventually became official military policy. And Kissinger was involved with that. So Schwab has been around some very influential mentors. And these are very powerful men that he's been around for quite some time. Also, the World Economic affiliations tie back to the Club of Rome. And they're aligned with Malthusianism. Malthusianism, sorry. Yes. And that's an idea that's overly large population would decimate resources and was intending to implement a global depopulation agenda. What did we just go through?
Well,
oh my gosh.
One thing I wanted to say too, with the folks that you just mentioned, just how the World Economic Forum and they have the young global leaders and the people coming up through, I believe Klaus Schwab is one of those people at a higher rung. But like you said, coming up under Club of Rome and the likes of those people. So I don't think he is the ultimate controller. He's controlled at a higher level. But yeah, and like they created the Event 201 simulation, and we experienced something very similar to that. And we have people that are pro depopulation.
Oh yeah.
And they go around and they talk about it to make it normal to people. So we're getting kind of used to hearing it like it's no big deal that you're planning on killing a bunch of people.
Right. Yeah. And it wasn't part of this this interview that Whitney Webb did, but it was just something that the Epic Times came out with yesterday. They were talking about Anthony Bourdain was in the Cannibal Club.
Yes.
And
I heard about that.
Cooking human meat. And they actually have Yeah, and I believe that Mrs. Zuckerberg, Mrs. Chan or Ms. Chan, Mrs. Zuckerberg is one of the major investors in the Cannibal Club, and it has been around for quite some time. And it's interesting that Anthony Bourdain is no longer with us because apparently he was having, the article was talking about how he was having some guilt
Second thoughts?
issues.
Having
And
second
he,
thoughts?
yeah, and then he ended up using heroin, to
Mm,
try to escape. And next thing, he just died.
yeah.
And so it's unclear if he was suicided or he died on his own. It's hard
You
to
know,
tell.
it's one of those, become one of our club, little members of our club, and we will treat you, as finely as possible. We'll give you your own show. We'll let you travel the world.
Right.
We'll promote you. You'll be rich. You'll have beautiful women at your side. It's all worth it if you just join us.
And in some cases, you might have young children at your side as well. I don't know if you recall seeing in that article the facial likeness of Anthony Bourdain and Jeffrey Epstein.
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
So I
very
don't know where that goes. I just find that nothing's coincidental anymore. You
interesting.
have to look at this stuff and come to your own discernment, but there are no surprises. There's no
Hmm.
surprises here whatsoever. So, do you want to talk about transhumanism and what this fourth industrial revolution's all about?
No discussion on the WEF would be complete without delving into transhumanism. It was a term that was coined by Julian Huxley, brother of Aldous. I don't know how to say it. Aldous Huxley,
Or
who
Aldous, yeah.
oh, who wrote The Brave New World. Julian Huxley, however, was the president of the British Eugenics Society and an ardent supporter of eugenics ideology. So eugenics, uh, what is eugenics?
Let's just call it, with fast
Fringe,
ways, abortion.
yeah, fringe set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population. Historically, eugenists have attempted to alter human gene pools by excluding people in groups judged to be inferior or promoting those judged to be superior. It's the selection of desired heritable characteristics in order to improve future generations, typically referring to humans. So
So we never
these
got rid of
people,
the Nazis.
no.
They-
um,
They're just, these are just the children of the horrible people from World War II that are now in leadership position. These are their
well,
children doing this.
and they spin it, they're spinning it, with different things. Even when you're pregnant now and you can get these tests, and if something comes back, we can terminate the pregnancy right away. If we think your child might have some kind of a defect. But I mean, that's part of eugenics, in my opinion.
Well, talking
uh,
about this new culinary experience, well, it's not so new, but of the Cannibal Club. Well,
huh.
it's interesting that there was, I think, one of the investors was was behind the eugenic movement, part of the Cannibal Club. So all of these
Mm.
people know each other. They all mix together, and the names are startling because many of these names we cross paths with in some sort of way, either
Yeah.
in social media, in the media itself. They might be in government, they might be in the movies, Hollywood, whatever the case is. They might be on our favorite cooking channel. You never know, but they're all there. They do mix. They're all
Well,
over the
yeah.
world.
And they make movies and stuff about this kind of stuff. And so those faces, they're they might be involved for real. But you see them in a movie, and so then that kind of makes you just kind of go, oh, it's all in the movies, right? So
Yes.
anybody that starts paying attention to this stuff and starts to talk about it, you're like a crazy person because that's just a TV show, that's just a movie. But it's really nuts. One thing I did want to mention, as we're talking about eugenics, um, they they were referring to the merging of man, or transhumanism, which we kind of touched on that. But the transhumanism part of this eugenics program has picked up steam.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you've got Elon Musk, with the chips. And so there's a very fine line to merging man with machine, right? So if
Right.
somebody is paralyzed and you're able to use that to stimulate, or you have a TENS unit or something like that that's stimulating, that's different. But I mean, I think they have plans to really control us, through these technologies. And so I don't know, that just the technology in the form of the wearables and the implants, like the brain chips, that, like I said, that could be something to help somebody with a speech impediment or whatever,
Right.
but it can also be one to surveil your very thoughts. And they also have the stuff where you think it and it can like type out. I
Yeah.
mean, they've had stuff like that for a long time, so this stuff is not new.
And it's
um
just like technology. It is such a fine line between the good and the evil. Um, you look at people with Parkinson's, for instance. There's implants that they now can implant surgery that will control the shaking and the nervousness that somebody with Parkinson's has. It might help them walk better. You have
mhm.
people who have lost their hearing, and by stimulating part of the brain, a cochlear implant, now you have people that were stone cold deaf who can hear. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Or you talk about the $6 million man or woman, which is coming true, because you look at military technology and some of our warriors who have lost limbs. They're having these surgeries, giving them mechanical arms or legs, and they're able to connect them, get the neuroplasticity to work to where they
Yeah.
can flex their leg or flex their arm. And
I
it's
mean,
not
that's
like it's not
incredible.
like the stick on sleeve, hook, or just kind of the leg the leg prosthetics, for lack
Which
of
is,
better term, that they used to have.
I mean, that, and these types of things these are incredible. This is helpful to people. And I guess, it comes down to that fine line is, who's the one, who are the people to oversee this, to make sure that things don't go too far, right?
Right.
With the regulations and that. And I mean, if you just look at the world, all the things that are going on, and then you have the puppets that are pretending like they're making policy and they're outraged over this or that. And it's like, come on, man. You
Come
you
on,
know this
man.
yeah, come on, man. This stuff's been going on for a long time. There's no way that you didn't know about it. You're just playing a role. Um, who is to protect us from this? I think the best protection for us all is to really pay attention. When they say that, they don't call it paying attention for nothing,
Right.
right? You need to pay attention to the right things in order to protect yourself. If you're paying attention to a television show or what the stars tell you, or getting involved in left versus right and all this other crap, your time, your valuable time and your valuable attention is being spent, being directed away from the things that are truly important. So that's what this show is about, is us trying to kind of bring this stuff up and have somebody think like, hey, We need to start paying attention to the right
Yeah.
stuff. So
And some of it is far-fetched and some of it is very real, and you have to use your critical thinking skills and discern for yourself what you
yeah,
wish to believe and what you don't.
yeah,
We're going to be coming up here to a break in just a
nice.
couple of moments, and when we come back, we're going to pick up on who's behind the transhumanism. The chief the chief transhumanist, if you will, at the World Economic Forum, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, we're back. And before we went to break, we were talking about the Whitney Webb interview and the outline by Joseph Mercola. He really put this in a good outline form, and it flows very well, which will lead us up to the next show that we'll be doing that goes into the deep dive with the players behind this whole horrible mess. Well, before we went to break, we were just going to go ahead and talk about who is basically the chief executive officer, if you will, at the World Economic Forum, who's in charge of transhumanism. And this is or one of the top advisors. It's probably the best way to describe him. And he's a very interesting fellow. His name is Yuval Noah Harari. He's a PhD, and he openly admits that data might enable globalists to do more than just build digital dictatorships via technology in the form of wearables and implants like brain chips. The idea is to one day surveil your very thoughts. Gosh, it almost sounds like pre-policing. Do you remember a movie about that? It had Tom Cruise in it, and he was working with a bunch of holographs, and it was called, it was pre-policing. So rather than going and they were stopping crime before it started. And this is where this is heading to. Now, humans are now hackable animals, Harari claims. Humans have the solar spirit and they have free will, and nobody knows what's happening inside us. So whenever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, and that's over. That's just over. He made the point that the fourth industrial revolution is different from past industrial revolutions because in the late 19th century, you had two classes, the exploited and the unexploited. And he says, in contrast, now the fourth industrial revolution will mean that there's three classes. You've got the unexploited, the exploited, and the irrelevant. He argues that it's much better to be exploited than irrelevant. Oh, gosh. In this scenario, the unexploited would be the oligarchs of society. He essentially is admitting that the fourth industrial revolution is a recipe for neo-feudalism, one that's managed by extremely invasive advanced technology. Wow. Eventually, the goal is to make...
You don't want to be the irrelevant.
No. And I wonder who they are today. Are the irrelevant the ones that are the guinea pigs, the ones that they're testing all of this on? I mean, look at the breakdown of society.
I would say the irrelevant has to be the folks that don't really have any skills. They don't really have any money. So maybe the people that are on welfare now, or the people that are on disability now, anybody that doesn't quite cut the mustard for in their eyes, because they have nothing to exploit. There's no gain, right? Their time is not as valuable as, say, our time, that, somebody that actually has money and contributes to society in one form or another. If you can exploit us to give them your attention and your money, right?
So it could be, what they're trying to do with the transgender movement, which is just, I don't know. I can think back many years where at the time a trans was a different name wasn't transgender, maybe even a transvestite. Okay.
Right.
Different names.
Yeah.
And I had them as clients. And, it wasn't my jam, but they had the right to do what they did. And that was okay, because the rule back in the day is like, it's none of my business what goes on in your home.
Right.
But when I was working in an industry that allowed me to come into people's homes, I observed how people lived and how different lifestyles lived. And I never passed judgment on them. It's not my job. And these folks were just happy being who they were and not to be having people pass judgment on them. And I think that that's pretty much where that population wanted to be. But now they're just out in the limelight. And I don't think that's where they want to be. They're being exploited.
They are being exploited. And a lot of folks, a few people that I know, they're quite frustrated by it. So, once again, you have the loudspeakers and the media showing you, projecting one story, and a few voices. A few voices do not represent the majority of those folks, and they're already a small percentage of the population. And so, it's just, they're once again trying to have an agenda, trying to put the narrative out there of something that they want people to believe, when the actual people that are involved in it are like, hey, you're doing something that we don't appreciate. And it doesn't mean that we're not happy. We want more rights or anything like that. We just want to live our lives, man. Leave us alone.
Yeah. Digital dollars, all of these other things we talk about. I mean, but this thing, the transhumanism stuff, I mean, if that doesn't bring you to the brink, I don't know what will. Because it affects everybody. And eventually, when they're done coming for you, they're going to be coming for themselves. It's just going to be one of those power grabs that will never stop. And it's an illness. And I just don't know what else to say about it, except that I will push back until I'm no longer on this earth to push back.
You know what else, Christy, is we will sound to some folks that don't want to acknowledge this stuff like we're silly, like we're, conspiracy theorists, the transhumanism thing is not real. It is real, people.
It is real.
Real. And it's
on their own website.
It's on their own website. They talk about it. If you read different articles, they'll mention it. It'll be in little bits and pieces. And it's something that's been happening over many years.
Yeah.
And the folks that are not kind of paying attention, they don't want to acknowledge it, because again, they have the movies and the things that they show, where it's so fantastical, you can't possibly believe that it's real. Well, you wouldn't think that it'd be possible to remove breasts or add breasts and give hormones and change someone's vocal and all the stuff that they're doing now, to make someone indistinguishable almost. I mean, you can't really, in my opinion, no, it's not my opinion, it's true. A man is a man and a woman is a woman. You can make it's yourself
chromosomes, baby.
Yes, you can change your body to look like a woman if you're a man, and I mean they're doing a damn good job,
right,
with some of these folks. They're indistinguishable, really. When you're like, wow, that's a prettier woman than I am. But you're not actually making that person a female in terms of chromosomes and whatnot. But it's happening.
Yes,
it's happening.
It is.
And anybody that's not paying attention or like not believing that that's true, it's going to sneak up and knock at your door. And you're like, ooh, hello.
Yeah. Do you remember the hidden Mickeys growing up?
Is that a drug? Is that a drug?
No, you think about Disney movies and they'd say, look for the hidden Mickeys.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that means something. and how this has progressed over the years. I mean, I have a granddaughter, and there's no way I would let her watch anything that's probably been produced in the last 20 years. And even in the stuff from the early 2000s and late 1990s, we look at very carefully, because the messaging has only gotten more flamboyant, more in your face than us growing up, and just kind of laughing. Is like, once we realized what hidden Mickeys were, when we're in our late teens and early 20s, we're laughing about it. It's like, oh yeah, there it is. And you're starting to count the hidden Mickeys. But now, having raised children, you realize how long this has been going on, and the subtle indoctrination, the subtle messaging. And now we have the most vulnerable, our children and our grandchildren, who are extreme risk right now. And so
you have to wonder, I mean, it makes you want to slow down everything to look and see, because it's the subliminal messaging, the hidden Mickey. It puts that it's in the psyche of, Mickey Mouse. I want, whatever. They can put whatever they want. And when everything's like being transmitted to us so quickly, we don't catch all of that stuff in real time. But when you slow down these videos, you're like, ooh, what are they putting into your brain? You don't realize you're seeing it.
Yeah.
And
there's some risque messaging for such young children, even going back to, like The Sword and the Stone and Cinderella and all of those movies, the classics. So it's been going on a long time. Let me continue here with what Harari is saying. He's the eventual goal is to make implantable devices capable of reading your thoughts, as we mentioned earlier, and commonplace as cell phones today. That's scary. That's what 5G is all about, and 6G as the next generation of cellular coverage comes about. It will help enable this to come together. So Harari at the World Economic Forum meeting says, the point that technology gets into your body and is capable of surveilling your thoughts is the line that the world crosses into digital dictatorship, where the leadership will be able to know what you really think about them and what you really think about issues. Well, who is the leadership? They have an idea. And if you don't agree, to use his words, you'll end up in the gulag the next morning. I think some of that's already happening around the world, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's without having implants. It's just that these devices, these devices here, listen. Have you ever had a conversation and you're not on your phone, but your phone is nearby, and you may be talking about a particular, let's say, a hammock, something just completely out of the blue, and next thing you know, you're being served up all of these advertisements about hammocks. Amazon's popping up. It's like, hey, this is something that you might be interested in.
Yeah.
So in these other countries where they're able to throw somebody in the gulag for what they said or what they texted, is they have this technology that's already working. It's just, can you imagine that the implants are there and you don't have to carry this device around? You just have to think about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's
maybe
those consent is threatened.
Maybe those seed phrases shouldn't be kept in your head. Just a side note.
Oh yeah, good point. Wow, I didn't think of that. Like, oh, I'm reading your thoughts right now. I know what your seed phrase is. It could anything be safe.
Yeah, so maybe you don't want to take your cryptocurrency seed phrases and memorize them. There's a good and not so good about that. So
the implications of the mass surveillance policies that are being promoted by the WEF, it's an unconstitutional monitoring of dissent.
It
and
is.
they have the intent of stamping it out. And you have big tech working with military and intelligence agencies, and they use what's known as predictive policing to detect the pre-crime, like you spoke about earlier.
Right.
So I mean, they use the algorithms to comb through the data on your internet activity, and profile you and decide if you may or may not commit some sort of crime in the future. We're inviting surveillance into and onto our bodies. We already are. We have been. And that's the thing. We think this is all coming because now they're talking about AI like so much. We've been living in an AI world. And I mean, we'll get to this in the next show where we kind of delve into who BlackRock and those sorts of people are. But a lot of our financial system has been being controlled by AI. In any event,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
We want to prevent that line from being crossed into a tech-fueled dystopia that would result in the digital dictatorship that once implemented will be almost impossible to escape from,
I agree. I don't know how you would escape from that, from our current level of knowledge. I don't know how we would.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, according to Whitney Webb, the most obvious way to stop it would be not to comply and not utilize the technologies that can be used to surveil you in these ways. And a lot of the technology is marketed as convenient, such as the biometric data. But the more of us that don't comply, the less successful this agenda will be. It is hard. There's so many things that are awesome that make our lives easier, right? You've got the cameras on the outside, you've got cameras on the inside of the house, you've got your cell phone. This cell phone, this is the tracking device that people don't even realize how much they're being tracked. Now we have smart TVs, we have smart radios, you name it, smart light bulbs, everything, right? So how do you detach yourself from this? You're probably not gonna stop using everything, right? They don't even hardly want to make phones that aren't smartphones anymore. Like I don't even know if you can buy a regular just flip phone.
You can, but they don't have any functionality except for making a phone call. They're not very efficient,
phone call, right?
They're going to be for that irrelevant class, very elderly people, so they have them for them. And I know that is a fact because I just helped somebody find one.
Well, and I have one that doesn't want to get rid of, this old flip phone that it's like the service is getting ready to push them off completely. Like, honey, you're not going to be able to replace that phone. It's not going to, you won't be able to replace it. But yeah, I mean, it's really, we're entering into a scary time. I guess it's more scary. It's more scary, I guess, for people that realize what's happening. And the folks that aren't paying attention, they think everything's just fine. And, oh, look at this cool new gadget. And, oh yeah, I think I'm just going to get the chip implanted in my arm because it's going to make it easier when I go to the checkout. Like, dude, if you can't carry a freaking wallet or, I mean, do you really need to put a chip in your body for that stuff? Come on now. That's ridiculous, in my opinion. No judgment. I'm not passing judgment on anybody that'd be willing to put a chip in your body. But if you do, why? I just want to know why. Hit us up in the comments and let us know why you would want that in your body.
Catherine Austin Fitz talks about this as well.
I love
about how to push back on this. And so you have people of all, this this is really good versus evil. This is not a left or right thing, although it somewhat is. But there are people on the left that don't appreciate this at all. And we know people on the right, some of them are, they're okay with some of this because they haven't become awake. You mentioned a couple things. You mentioned about this thing runs everybody's life. It was in the Epic Times where they were talking about Gen Z, and Gen Z just feels like, we have totally wrecked their world. They're not going to have retirement or whatnot. So the way that they spend their money, they like expensive things and they want things quick and they want it now. They don't want complication, and they're targets. They're huge targets. And you can see that this is what's happening in society with our Gen Zers. And if you're kind of interested, while I took a break here looking up what was the name of the movie that Tom Cruise was in, it's called Minority Report. And it goes back almost 20 years ago. So when you think about how Hollywood projects things, this was already projected. About
I'm gonna have to watch that. I haven't seen that one.
The pre-crime. I think it was also called the pre-crime unit, and he was, I believe, the police chief. So it is a good movie. It's one I want to go back and see again too, because it's been a number of years since we saw it. We've got about 6 minutes left. I was wondering if we might be able to talk about the public-private partnership organizational chart. Maybe we can finish off the show. So do you have that visual available?
Let's see here. I do. Hopefully, let's see if this works. Is that working?
Yes. Now it's a little blurred, but and that's okay, because on the left-hand side is the most important thing, I believe. And we can talk about what is to the right of those categories.
Okay.
Now, we're pretty good at researching, but we didn't think this stuff up ourselves. We were able to, there's some very smart people that were able to collaborate together and put this into a chart that makes it make sense, because these people are all over the place and they're in all kinds of organizations. And I just think that this is a great graphic to understand how this whole global game works. And it starts off with the policymakers. And it's like Melissa had mentioned earlier, the World Economic Forum gets its marching papers from somewhere else. And as you can see on this chart, you have the Bank of International Settlements, and then you have
the central banks.
You have the central banks. Oh my goodness. Banks. And so then below that, you have the World Economic Forum, the Club of Rome. Oh my gosh. How did they end up there? And then you had the Chatham House.
Chatham House.
Yeah.
Is that the Rockefellers? I can't really see.
Yes. So that's the top rung. So the Bank of International Settlements, and there's another pyramid below that actually goes with this as well. But the Bank of International Settlements, think about money and globalists, they run together. Everything's tied to money. So it makes sense. Yes, it does. So it makes sense the Bank of International Settlements basically sits on the top of this pyramid.
Yep.
Then after the policymakers, so let's call the World Economic Forum, as part of the policy-making group, even though the marching orders come a couple of rungs above them, but they're still in the policymaker category. You have what? The policy distributors.
Yeah, the policy. Yeah. Oh, yep.
And who might they be?
You got the United Nations.
Didn't we talk about them too? Yes.
World Bank, the WHO, they played a big part in what happened in the last couple of years. You have your global corporations, Your philanthropist,
Oh
Bill
my,
Gates.
oh,
Does that ring a bell?
oh my gosh. What a coinky dink in your
Uh-huh.
non-governmental organizations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting, right?
Then you
And
would,
each one, I will say this, each one of these could be a show. Is like you do a show on the World Economic Forum, and then who is Club of Rome, who are the Rockefellers, who's the United
right,
Nations history. I mean, there's a lot of information there. And to really grasp what's happening, you kind of need to understand who these players are or kind of pay attention to them a little bit. But we
right.
don't have time for that. So
Yeah,
we're
we've
going
got
to
about 2 minutes, so let's try to breeze through this. So
okay.
you have the next, or you would think that these guys would be on top, but it's the policy enforcers, and they're our government, our
Yes.
so-called elected officials, the
Yep.
civil servants, the police
Military's
department,
in
the
there.
military, the courts, you name it. And then
Mhm.
you've got selected scientific,
Selected scientific authorities.
selected and elected. Yep.
Yeah.
And then
MHR.
Then you've got what policy propagandist. Any guess on who they might be? Now, this is another pyramid that we can show you. We'll have to do that on the next show. But it talks about how the media is under its own hierarchical chart, or it's under its own pyramid. You'll be surprised who's on top of that.
Yeah, I love that. Yep,
And
that'd be
then,
great.
then who's left? You and me, baby.
Subjects.
Yes. The public, the plebs.
Oh, the public.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And hey, we didn't make this stuff up.
Nope.
This comes from their own websites, folks.
Yep.
So it's horrific. It's horrible. And the only way you can fight back peacefully without having to raise arms, you don't have to get into major contentions. You just push back with knowledge. That's how you do it.
Yep.
You just simply say, no, I've had enough. So we're coming up to the close, to the end of the show. And we just want to say thank you for being here today. And you can find the show archived at vitabroadcastnetwork.com. And you can visit us on Twitter at Vita Broadcast. That's at Vita, VIDA, Broadcast. It's been great seeing you today. Great talking with you, Melissa.
You too, Christy. We look forward to having you, having another show where we can delve a little deeper into this World Economic Forum business.
All right. We'll see you next time. Have a great
day.